So I was thinking about the second reading that Lori proclaimed from the letter to the Hebrews. I began to hear the melody of a song we're quite familiar with. We walk by faith and not by sight. No gracious words we hear of him who spoke as none e'er spoke, but we believe him near. In today's passage, the author doesn't try to define what faith is. Rather, he uses descriptors. Faith is the realization of things hoped for. It is evidence of things not seen. The audience for this letter are Jewish Christians living in Jerusalem, having experienced persecution. And to them, as a word of encouragement, he wants to have this story about people they're familiar with. And who better than Abraham and Sarah, ancestors in our faith? And the author gives 4 examples in today's reading about times in their life when they were asked to walk by faith. So what I'd like to do today is simply repeat those stories briefly and try to make connections of how they're being lived out today. By faith, at the age of 75 for Abraham and 65 for Sarah, God asked them to pull up roots and move to a new place. Wasn't exactly specific on where it was they were to go, but he asked them to take everything that they were comfortable with, familiar with, and they began that journey with their servants and their riches. If you want a sense of it, the experience of what Abraham and Sarah went through, I don't know if any of you fit the category, but if you're around the age of 75 and you've had to downsize your home to go to an apartment, maybe that would be one example. Or if you're younger and you've moved your adult parents from their home to an apartment or somewhere else. Let's just be honest, that is no fun time to do, is it? You then begin to realize how much junk have we saved through the years. I don't have a place to put it any longer. So then you can have some sense about what Abraham and Sarah were going through when they had this invitation from God. And so they began to walk by faith to a new place. I think right now at this time of year, besides those who may have to do some downsizing, in our parish we have a number of people ready to begin school. It might be a new school for some this year, or it might be some who are going to college and away from home for the first time. They too will have the Abraham and Sarah experience, been asked to pick up, move to a new place, plant some roots. We walk by faith, not by sight. By faith, Abraham and Sarah, we heard, wandered through this desert area as they journeyed to their new place. I don't know how many of you traveled this summer. Were there any times that you got lost along the way? Were there any arguments that broke off about directions you should be going? Now remember, Abraham and Sarah, this is pre-GPS, this is pre-AAA. They had to have those same experiences as they were going. There had to be a moment when Sarah said, couldn't you have asked somebody else at the oasis where the next watering hole was? My God, you are a stubborn man. Wandering, walking by faith. They have an idea where they're going, but the journey was one of wandering. So too for us, there are moments when we wander a variety of ways. Parishioners who receive news of a health treatment plan, not what they expected. One of our parishioners is transitioning from a hospital stay to rehab, maybe long-term, maybe permanent, to move into assisted living. Again, not what expected, and wondering how to get there. We also have some folks who are about to celebrate a marriage. Tom Dapron and Mary Ann Roca de Cruz over here. Wave your hands. It's this Saturday. But also later in the fall, there is Sarah Meyer and Jason Ernst. There is Rachel Bunyak, along with Noah Arndt. And there is Ryan Bennett and Megan Barker. Each of them, including them, they have wandered as couples, if you would, and came to meet each other and began to walk together. And they're about to walk into a new promised land, a promised land of being husband and wife. They're also one day, hopefully, to walk in the promised land of being parents. But you do that walking by faith. And part of our responsibility as a parish community is to pray for them and the other couples I named, like all engaged couples. There is a sort of wandering dance together till we begin to walk together and, like I said, enter a new promised land, promised given to them. By faith, at the age of 100 for Abraham and at the age of 90 for Sarah, they got the message they're going to have a son. Come on, folks, use your imagination with this. Any of you would like to have that right now? You know, that's why young people have children. Think of all those grandparents here who can't wait to let the 3 kids leave after 4 days, and you're exhausted. And Abraham and Sarah going, we're going to be parents for the first time. I don't know if you can walk much more by faith anytime you become parents. But at this time in their life, it's the fulfillment of God's promise to them. And so they embark on this journey. Think about parishioners who are awaiting the birth of a child or the arrival of a child through adoption. Again, they walk by faith. We have a few baptisms coming up over the next few months. Again, walking by faith in another time. But don't underestimate what Abraham and Sarah had to do when they made that decision, as it is for anyone choosing to have a child. Walking by faith. And then by faith, Abraham was asked by God to offer his son, his only son, as a sacrifice to God. This is the one who incarnated God's promise for Abraham and Sarah to be parents of many generations, with sons and daughters as numerous as the stars in the sky. Seems rather cruel, doesn't it? To Abraham, does he trust God? And so the decision is, do I put my trust in this boy I can hold and touch and see? Or do I put my trust in God's word, a word of promise, that you would be a father of many? Abraham chooses to walk this way by faith. Things change. Isaac is saved. But what an act of faith that is. Do I trust what I see? Do I trust God's word? I'm not sure if there's some specific Isaacs among us here today to talk about. But I would like you to think about what might be the Isaac in your life. That one relationship so important. Maybe it is a community you're a part of. Maybe it's a ministry or a service you enjoy so much to be a part of. And what if God is calling you to move on from that? Would you be ready to walk by faith? Not easy to do. But I think that's how we live out that same story, you and I. Do I trust God that much? And walking by faith. I think the other thing that makes walking by faith difficult is it's not just about you and I walking, but it's all these other things that are happening around us at the same time that we walk. So, again, locally, Friday was the 5th anniversary of the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson. That opened up so many different things to have to be dealt with. But at the same time, a reminder at each and every time that first responders get a call, their lives are in danger in some way. It's a both and. Last weekend, the violence we read about in Dayton, El Paso, but also Chicago and St. Louis. And there was a car bomb in Kabul, killed 18, wounded 145. And yet we're walking by faith in the midst of it all. This past week was a reminder for us to think about the atomic bomb at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I also keep reading about revelations of clergy abuse. We walk by faith in the midst of it all. See, that's what even makes it even more complicated. It'd be okay if I could just wrestle with what I was doing. But all these things also have an impact on my walk. We heard again, faith was about the realization of things hoped for and evidence of things not seen. But I think the other side of faith and walking by faith is to walk in the company of others. To hear other people tell their stories of how they're walking. I mean, we heard Abraham and Sarah's story. It'd be great for them to hear our story too. One of the things about these pastor conversations, one of the questions I ask is everyone to think about, over the past year, since last July, what was one grace or blessing you experienced by being a member of this parish? Out of the entire 2-hour conversations we have, that's the most important moment, I think, is for people to realize what they are and to tell someone else what it was, and for people to hear that back and forth. Those are signs of people who walk by faith. They are stories of people who walk by faith. That's what we're about. So it is about, maybe with a partner, walking with God, but also the role that the community plays in that walking by faith. Help then, O Lord, our unbelief, and make our faith found, to call on you when you are near, and seek where you are found.